Jonathan Jones, art critic of The Guardian. Welcome to the Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution.
Thank you. Thanks.
It's wonderful that you'll be doing one of our keynote speeches on the 23rd of September on your book, Earthly Delights, The History of the Renaissance. So we're really looking forward to this in just a few weeks' time. And we want to use this video really to whet people's appetite to your talk. And what the better way to start than actually introducing Sandra Higgins, our arts convener, who is going to ask a couple of questions about art in the Renaissance and your book. And then I'll ask a few questions about the Renaissance in general with you and have a quick chat. And then we hand it over to the audience, who hopefully will get benefit from this video and then turn up in droves. So I'll hand it over to Sandra. Over to you, Sandra.
Okay, thank you very much, Andreas. And welcome again, Jonathan. It's nice to see you.
Right. Cheers. Hi. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. And thank you for last year when you did the talk on Artemisia Gentileschi for what was it called? Extraordinary Women. Sorry, for a moment it's out of my head.
And she was an extraordinary woman,
She
definitely.
certainly was, yeah, absolutely. And I've been looking at some of your reviews recently and seeing exactly what type of art critic you are. How did you get involved as an art critic? And you're quite direct. Let's put it that way.
I obviously love art. And there was a moment actually in America, in New York, when I started writing about it and sending articles to The Guardian, and a few other places originally. And I think, well, you put your finger on it. I think there was a moment when I suddenly felt I had a lot to say, that I understood it better than other people, and I was going to tell them. And that's what a critic is. Someone who's very arrogant and believes that they are right about things.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, without an opinion, I mean, what is the role of a critic? I mean, you're absolutely right. That's what a critic does, and sometimes a critic helps you to look at things in a very different way that you
Well,
might.
yeah. I mean, I think also, of course, it's also about hopefully having some knowledge, building up some knowledge that you can share, and just, helping people towards, I mean, I hope helping people towards what's worth looking at, and pointing people away from not what's not worth looking at, which of
Yes.
course is also a consumer advice in today, because if you go to see an exhibition, you might be paying a lot of money for it. So obviously you want some sense of, is it worth it?
Yeah,
So
what
that's
Sure. Well, how did that lead you to your interest in the Renaissance then?
I've loved the Renaissance since I was a child. It was the first art I saw, basically. I'm from North Wales, which is a lovely, obviously beautiful part of the world. Not a lot of art galleries or museums or anything like that. And I didn't really go to art galleries in London. I never went to. It was, I didn't go to the National Gallery or the Tate Gallery until I was a student, much later on. So as a
Mhm.
teenager, as a kid, as a child, um, I was very lucky. Went on holiday to Italy, saw the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, the Capitoline in Rome, and so basically the art that made me want love art was Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, Michelangelo. I just still absolutely love it, and I also see it as modern. I don't see it as belonging to the past. I don't think. Yeah, I think for some people that's so old art, but I've never seen it that way. And I suppose, but you also mentioned you asked me about criticism. I think actually looking with a critical eye is really important, actually, when it comes to art history. I think the Renaissance has been, sometimes people are crushed by the sort of monumental nature of it. You go to a museum and you know, it's all there, and you're told about it, but can you relate in order to relate to it, you have to relate to it kind of critically. In other words, when I say I love the Renaissance, I mean particular works. I don't mean I just love every piece of Renaissance art. I sort of do at one level, but and the writer who taught me to look at the Renaissance with a sort of fresh, well, hopefully a fresh critical eye, was Vasari, Giorgio Vasari, who
Yes, sure.
lived in the 16th century, worked at the Medici court, and he wrote the lives of the artists
Hmm.
in 1550, first book of art history. then the first book, the book that invented the Renaissance in a sense, you see. But he's hugely critical, and it was really a amazing thing when as I say, I was starting my own career as a critic, and I read Vasari and realizing that he talks about something like, he'll talk about his contemporary artists, these artists who are in museums today, but he talks about, oh, and this he wasn't much good, and whereas he makes it very clear about
Yeah.
who are the really great ones, and actually a lot of the time he's right. But that made me, I think, so that's one. I think if we go, what I mean is, I want us to engage with Renaissance art and to look at it as if it was contemporary art, really, as if it was, something that we can feel as art. It's not something that should be buried in university courses and sort of, treated as just as history. It's living art.
Mm, yes, and not elitist. I mean, opening it to the public so
That's
that
right. Yeah.
it's accessible, because I think so many people consider it as out of their reach or out of their comprehension.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
Again, that's to do with the way it's. I mean, obviously, because it's been this is 500, 600
yeah,
years that people have been writing about it,
yes,
and of course, there's a weight of interpretation, and that can be very alienating. So yes, I think, and yet when if you go to Florence, you go to the Uffizi Gallery, you see the crowds in front of Botticelli, Botticelli's Primavera and the
yeah,
Birth of Venus. It's like, and the other crowds in the Sistine Chapel,
yeah,
crowds in front of the Mona Lisa in Paris.
Yeah.
It's very popular art. It's
yeah,
very popular art, that the most beloved art, at some level, the most accessible art. And so, yeah, we need to cut through the obfuscation that can build
mm,
up around it to
yeah,
see it directly.
yes, sure. Andreas, yeah,
Good, yes. And
yeah,
obviously, one of the things that's interesting, so, we started talking about the Renaissance, over a period of time. But obviously, talk us a little bit more about your book, because your book, Earthly Delights, The History of the Renaissance, is what you're coming to talk about. So I think it might be useful to get a quick glimpse into what got you to particularly write this book, and what can the audience expect when they turn up on the 23rd of September.
Well, Earthly Delights, I mean, it's the story of the European Renaissance. So I've of course been mentioning Italian artists straight away, but in Earthly Delights, actually, I start with Jan van Eyck in 15th century Bruges, and I put together art that people might think of as medieval art or Gothic art, northern European art. It's the whole of Europe, and basically, I think there wasn't such a big difference, that the key discovery of the Renaissance, if you like, with perspective, how to paint objects in real space, that was invented pretty much simultaneously by Jan van Eyck up in Belgium,
Mm.
and by artists in Florence. So that when you realize that's simultaneous, then it becomes a sort of cognitive. It's a cognitive shift. It's an amazing cognitive shift at the end of the Middle Ages, that Europe starts to see things differently, to think about the world differently, to feel it differently. And it's also the age of curiosity. It's the age of curiosity. It's the age when Europe discovers the world and discovers itself by discovering the world. Um, by the it's the Renaissance that creates the idea of Europe, but it also creates the idea of the world. Obviously, the biggest, most spectacular event of the Renaissance, in a way, was Christopher Columbus sailing across the Atlantic, making landfall in the New World, and that age of discovery, age of curiosity, nowadays can be seen. Of course, people see the dark side of it, and there was a dark side in the long run, but at the time, it's amazing. There was a lot of openness, a lot of genuine curiosity, a genuine fascination with different customs, different places. So actually, at the heart of Earthly Delights is the Garden of Earthly Delights
Mm.
by Hieronymus Bosch. So Hieronymus Bosch he's absolutely an artist who tends not to be talked about as a Renaissance artist at all, but a crazy medieval paint, late medieval painter in this little town in Holland, and he's creating these weird things. But he was absolutely part of the Renaissance. He was very popular in Renaissance Italy. His works were sold, you can find some of his works today in Venice because he was popular there. And he uses perspective. His art would be impossible without perspective. Um, and the Garden of Earthly Delights, which is this, absolutely bustling, teeming, crazy painting full of um, apparently mad scenes. At the heart of it has a vision of an earthly paradise
Yeah.
where naked men and women are, living a life of total hedonism, eating giant strawberries, and yeah, I mean, nature feeds them.
Yeah.
And so I argue in the book, and I think it's, conclusively really that this is about the new world, the stories that were coming back from the Americas were very much about, the naked peoples, um, and were they sinners, or were they living in a kind of paradise? Was it an earthly paradise? And Bosch is very much fantasizing that it's an earthly paradise. Um, and beyond that, what do I mean by earthly delights? What does Bosch mean by earthly delights? Well, I'm arguing that the Renaissance was in the 19th century. The Renaissance, the word Renaissance comes from the 19th century. It was applied to this period in the 19th
Yeah.
century, and they thought it was a total revolution, a secular revolution, the end of the Christian, the Christian medieval world is sort of ended and blown away by this Renaissance in which people rediscover, life and pleasure and joy, and after centuries of
Yes.
thinking about God, they suddenly think about life on Earth, earthly delights, and I try to show in the book that that's true, that that's absolutely true of
So are
Renaissance
you,
art.
Jonathan, are you in general then quite in agreement with Jakob Burckhardt
Yes.
in
Well, I mean, I
terms
think
of describing a sort of change, like a revolutionary change during that time that covered not just art, but architecture, politics, social organization. It was quite a broad
right.
thing, the Renaissance. And you mentioned the influence of the New World, and obviously, we influences go both ways. Do you see any influences coming from the East through the trade routes, the Silk Road and the Hanseatic leagues and things like that? Do you see some there as well, or do you see it's mainly
Absolutely.
okay?
Uh, well, just to answer first on Burckhardt, absolutely. I think it's not that. Oh, clearly, he was writing in. His book was published in the mid 19th century, and of course, and ever since it's been revised, and there's been generations of historians have you know sort of questioned it, but it remains that the core of what I think the core of his argument is, yeah, it's true, and it's been overly people are overly skeptical about it. Historians have been too skeptical about it because otherwise, there was basically what I'm saying is there really was such a thing as a Renaissance, and it really was a great cultural change, not just as an art style, um, and I know it was it clearly was. Secular. It was finding that in classical culture, the ancient Greek pagan culture, they found a way of representing things that they hadn't been able to represent in the Middle Ages, or that had been consigned to the margins of manuscripts.
Yeah.
So basically, you know, anyway, um, on the East, absolutely, I think people have. I think there's been a lot of interesting um, work on this, and there certainly is. A big dialogue between East and West. I mean, one of the ways that happens is to do with the Ottoman conquest of Istanbul, Constantinople. Uh, that leads to a lot of Eastern Greek scholars coming over, and that's the traditional sort of view of the Renaissance. So yeah, again, it's got a lot of truth in it that that the Byzantine scholars brought a lot of Eastern ideas, but yes, there's also dialogues. I don't think I don't see it as I think I think it's a really interesting and really true. I also I think I suppose one of the things I'm trying to understand in Earthly Delights and in other work, there is a distinctiveness to Europe. Europe, the Renaissance is the moment of European takeoff, I suppose. That Europe, medieval Europe, was way behind the
Yeah.
Islamic world, um, and in the Renaissance, that's not true. That you know that they take that they learn a lot of things from Islamic science and so forth, but they apply it in new ways so that this, yeah, for better or worse, if you like, this was the moment when Europe became
Hmm.
had a
Oh,
kind of energy to it that was,
yeah.
unique.
Okay, so it's basically what you're saying is the Renaissance was really a new beginning after the Middle Ages in Europe and actually propelled it artistically and also scientifically and socially into a different and a new realm.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
which
And you're
was
sorry,
yes,
and you're saying it happened simultaneously throughout Europe, basically, is what you're saying.
yeah,
It wasn't just in Italy, as we all hear, but it was a progress
yes.
in life in
Yeah.
general that brought about this new beginning in ways of thinking.
That's right, and maybe that was Burckhardt's mistake that as a northerner, like all northerners, he's fascinated by the South, and he was
Yeah.
sort of he had a kind of
Yes.
fantasy of Italy, but in fact, if you look at it, really, it was happening across Europe, and it
Yeah.
wasn't. And that crucial point when I was thinking about the book was, in fact, I happened to visit in the course of a mixture of work and pleasure. I happened to visit Venice and Bruges in the course of a fortnight. And realized, well, obviously they're superficially similar because they've both got canals, but also, merchant cities, these merchant cities on different sides of Europe, and of course they had much more they had a huge amount in common, um, and it's probably the merchants in the end. The Renaissance probably comes down to the merchant the merchant class that arose in the Middle Ages in towns and cities across Europe, especially when Bruges and Florence both absolutely at the forefront of
Yeah.
a new commercial economy, that had grown up gradually over the Middle Ages and that's frees itself from the feudal system,
Mm.
and you have these kind of merchant-led communities who are really quite sort of hard-headed about reality and money and things, and they want an art that very much reflects the real world, and so
Mm.
that's what
Well,
appears.
yes, but we better stop, Jonathan, because otherwise you will have given your talk. You're going to give away too much to the audience right now. So we better draw the chat to a conclusion. But from Sandra and myself, I mean, thank you very much for coming along on the 23rd of September to give a keynote introduction to the Renaissance. The Renaissance actually at the BRLSI starts in mid-September, and people can find out about it by going to brlsi.org. Go to What's On, and there's a section there on the Renaissance. So you can look at all the various talks. There's going to be about 35 talks over a 10-month period, and we're starting in mid-September. So once again, for the audience of this video, go to brlsi.org and go to the What's On section, and you will see a separate header there for the Renaissance. Jonathan, once again, many, many thanks, and we look forward to seeing you in September. All the very best.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks very
Thank
much.
you very much.